I stumbled upon 2 hours of true creepy Craigslist horror stories, and I wish I hadn't. I never should have opened that door. The one that led to a dark clickbait rabbit hole, twisting my ordinary evening into a nightmare. It started innocently. I was sprawled on my couch, laughter spilling out of my phone as I scrolled through mundane items for sale. But then I stumbled upon a thread. Creepy Craigslist ads. A sick curiosity bubbled inside me. I clicked. My heart raced as I read the first story. A woman selling a piano. She claimed it was haunted. My mind whispered, yeah, right. But as I read on, she described the chilling notes that echoed in the dead of night. I could almost hear them, the tinkle of keys playing themselves. Cold sweat trickled down my back. I shook it off. Just a story. I moved to the next ad. A vintage doll in a cracked glass case. The seller insisted it whispered names at midnight. My apartment felt different. Shadows danced in the corners. I glanced around, feeling the weight of the darkness pressing in, suffocating. The air turned heavy and cold. I shuddered. Why did I read this? I cursed myself for letting curiosity override common sense. The next ad was worse. A painting that changed its scene depending on your mood. The words twisted around my mind like vines. The picture of a crying child. It was lifelike. The ad warned to keep it out of reach. Suddenly, a distant thud echoed through my empty space. My heart dropped into my stomach. Did something just move? I held my breath, ears straining for the next sound. A soft scratching noise, like fingernails against wood, crept closer. Oh God, what was that? My throat tightened. I shuffled backwards on my seat, the couch feeling like a flimsy barrier against whatever lurked beyond. Then, a loud crash resonated from the back of my apartment. Panic flared in my chest. I jumped up, heart pounding. My fingers trembled as I grasped my phone. Who would I even call? I could feel the weight of shadows following me as I moved toward the noise. I stopped at my bedroom door, breath shallow. The air felt electric, and every hair on my arms stood on end. I opened the door slowly, creaking against the silence. My heart raced as my eyes scanned the drenched darkness. Nothing. But then I noticed something on my bed. A figure too vague to make out crouched low. The room was frozen, my throat a tight knot. And then it turned. A glimmer of eyes in the darkness. My scream caught in my throat, suffocating my voice. Was it real? I stepped back, but the door slammed shut behind me. The echo rang in my ears. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The air turned thick with an unspeakable tension, so palpable it pressed against my skin like a vice. It took all my willpower to tear my gaze away from those glimmering eyes lingering in the dark. Heart racing, I lurched toward the door, clawing at the handle, frantically rattling it, but it refused to budge. A laughter, low and guttural, echoed from the depths of my bedroom like a mocking specter. I turned back, my pulse drumming in my ears as the figure began to rise. The disjointed movements sent a wave of revulsion crashing over me. An outline of limbs formed in the shadows, elongated and unnatural. The face that emerged was a nightmarish grin, stretching wider than humanly possible, its mouth framed by unkempt strands of hair that hung like serpents. It felt like I was staring into the very depths of madness. Desperation forced me to glance around the room, hunting for an escape. My nightstand was littered with dust, untouched books, and an old lamp that cast fractured beams of light onto the walls. I could see glimpses of my own fear reflected back at me in the shards of glass scattered beneath the nightstand's mirrors, echoing my horror. Suddenly, the walls pulsed. Shadows began to stretch and pulse, warping and swirling, bleeding into shapes. I could almost hear whispers flickering around me, the rasp of serrated voices intermingling with my own heartbeat. "Help," I barely whispered, desperate for someone, anyone, to hear. The figure's ghastly grin widened, and I stumbled back as it laughed again. The sound rolled through the room like thunder, vibrating in the very marrow of my bones, drowning out my thoughts. In an instinctive reaction, I darted toward the small window. The nights here always felt oppressive, encased in glass, but it was all that stood between me and whatever this creature had planned. My nails dug into the frame, but the window wouldn't yield, a stark reminder of my confinement. How had I never noticed how utterly trapped I was? A sudden crash jolted me back to the real world, the one outside my door. A low, guttural voice, hoarse yet melodic, crooned through the gap beneath, thickening the air with terror. "That's right, keep her in there. Don't let her escape." The dread curled like smoke in my throat. Thinking rapidly, I grabbed the lamp and raised it above my head, ready to bludgeon whatever horror stood before me. But as I faced the figure again, my resolve faltered. It had taken a step closer, moving out of the enveloping shadows, revealing a stale, skeletal face. The hollow sockets locked onto mine, making me question if it was even human. "Do you remember me?" It rasped, each word emitting a wet, slithering sound. "You invited me in through your curiosity." An unseen force tore through my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I remembered every word I read, every cursed item I encountered, each one pulling me deeper into this labyrinth of dread. Panic surged again, and I darted for the door. There had to be a way out. Shaking the handle violently, I screamed. The haunting laughter escalated all around me now, crowding in, a cacophony that invaded my mind. Just as I felt the final crack of sanity slip away, the lights flickered, illuminating the frightening figure dancing between worlds, pulling its form closer to reality. Then, just as quickly, the lights went out entirely, plunging me into haunting darkness from the inky blackness. I heard a whisper cloaked in malice and dripping with satisfaction. "You brought them. Now you can't escape." The walls trembled, pulsating with a life of their own, and I could feel the creature, no longer in front of me but inside the very shadows clinging to my body. Suddenly, a sharp, frantic rapping started at the door, accompanied by an incoherent murmur that sent shivers racing down my spine. My breath caught in my throat. Who was there? Was it something trying to enter? I gathered my courage and approached the door, heart thudding furiously against my ribs. But then the incessant rapping stopped. Silence enveloped me again, an unsettling quiet, until a single voice echoed from the other side. "Let me in, they're coming for you." The pulse of dread surged again. Would I dare open the door, risking that the true horror lay just beyond? Or did I risk remaining trapped with that lingering nightmare lurking within these walls? As I hesitated, the shadows around me seemed to thicken and swirl, threatening to consume me whole. I could sense something sinister preparing to cross the threshold, and with every second, the air felt increasingly suffocating. I in that frozen moment. My hand hovered over the doorknob, paralyzed by the weight of my choice: life or death, escape or demise. The shadows whispered again, urging me to choose. But just as I made my decision, something or someone slammed against the door, shaking the frame with deafening force. The barriers of my reality began to splinter. The impact reverberated through every fiber of my being, the rattling door a vile reminder of the chaos threatening to spill in. My instincts screamed for me to retreat, but something deeper, more primal, held me at the threshold. I was filled with a mix of dread and twisted curiosity, a compulsion to confront whatever dark entity awaited me, only to face the inevitable. "Let me in." The voice was calm yet urgent, laden with a soothing cadence that warped into something unnerving. It sent echoes of unfulfilled promises dancing in my mind, reminding me of the loneliness that had come creeping in whenever night fell. Suddenly, a frantic laughter burst forth from the shadows, and the air became frigid, a shivering cold that seeped into my bones. "Let her in, let her in." The creature's grotesque grin reflected my own terror, twisting my emotions into a chaotic storm. "Or perhaps it's time for her to join us." The whispers rose again, cascading like a dark waterfall around me, brushing the edges of my sanity. They were voices I recognized, the relentless whispers of every uninvited nightmare I had ever conjured. My pulse thundered, synchronized with the pounding at the door, a grim serenade heralding my impending ruin. That I in an act of desperation, I threw myself against the door, slamming my shoulder into it as if to force it open. "Who are you?" I yelled, my voice faltering in the face of insurmountable horror. "What do you want from me?" "Everything," answered the voice, distinctly louder now. "They said you were open, eager to uncover secrets you couldn't handle." Panic infected my mind as if I were being dragged a delirious haze where fear coiled around logic. My thoughts flitted to the items I had accumulated over the years, each one a thread pulling tighter around my throat. The locked drawer holding remnants of those cursed things whispered incessantly in my mind, a cruel reminder of glamorized horror stories that belied their potential consequences. The window. I stumbled toward the glass, desperate for a way out. My hands scrabbled against its frame, but the sensation of dread whispered that escape came with a price. Cold fingers woven from darkness gripped my ankles, threatening to drag me down into an abyss even the light could not pierce. "Open the door," they yelled, and the clamoring intensified, transforming into a monstrous roar, an echo of the primal forces unleashed by my choices. I turned back, the dread enveloping me like an unwanted shroud, and gripped the doorknob while fighting a rising wave of despair. Just before I could twist it, the shadows converged, a grim knot tightening around my chest, pulling me into its dark embrace. I gasped for air as I felt them sweeping in, suffocating and alive, each shadow carrying fragments of tormented souls who had fallen prey to the same insatiable curiosity that drove me. My throat tightened, choking on their torment. "Join us," the creature purred from deep within the gloom, its voice an intoxicating blend of longing and despair. "It's time to share your knowledge forever." In that moment of horrifying clarity, I realized the truth. The chilling whispers, the relentless pulling of shadows, the grotesque form lurking in the corner, everything had only one goal. They sought not just to claim me but to assimilate the knowledge I held, the familiarity I had with them and their secrets. My mind reeled in turmoil. I twisted the doorknob, my body thrumming with fear and adrenaline, only to feel it suddenly resist, as if the door were alive, refusing to allow me passage. Then, like a breath of ice, something cold touched the back of my neck, sending electric shockwaves racing down my spine. The shadows coiled themselves around my limbs, tightening like a noose. "Don't let them in," the confident voice behind the door whispered desperately. "You have to trust me." A searing pain radiated through me, the chilling grasp of the shadows solidifying their hold, and I felt rage and hopelessness collide within me. I tore my gaze away from the twisted darkness coalescing at my feet. Whatever was behind that door, whatever offered release, was as much of a threat as the entity that held me captive here. "Let them come," I shouted back defiantly, feeling the shadows wrench in surprise. "They'll face them, I'll face anything." In response, the pressure mounted, and a different sound erupted, an insatiable moan that morphed into a wild, deranged laughter echoing from within those shadows, a harsh cacophony pitching higher and higher until it reached a fevered shriek. "Let in." Just as the last words spilled from the creature's mouth, a cracking sound resonated through the air in a deafening explosion, the door splintering apart beneath an immeasurable force. The boundaries of my reality dissolved, and as I was thrown backward into chaos, forgetting which way was safe, a figure burst forth from the door's remnants, a harbinger of the very darkness I had tried so desperately to resist, and with that, they came pouring in. The world around me splintered, spilling shadows like ink on wet paper. Tumbling backward, I hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. The echo of the door's demise hung in the air, a grotesque finale to my feeble stand. My heart thrummed in my ears, a primal rhythm synced to the encroaching dark, a reminder of what I had invited into this sanctuary. I rolled onto my back, frantic breaths clawing at my throat. The room was no longer the familiar walls painted with soft hues. Instead, it stretched and warped, a tar pit of looming phantoms that hovered just beyond the edges of sight. Figures emerged, glistening shades that pulsed and flickered like a television screen on the brink of static. They moved with a serpentine grace, alive with malice, their forms twisting and contorting in ways that defied comprehension. Welcome, their whispered chorus came, intermingled with the gnashing of teeth and the bitter taste of decay. Each syllable felt like a freeze over open wounds, a refutation of everything I held dear. No love, no light, only the promise of terror. My skin prickled with their collective presence, each whisper a chilling caress against my fraying sanity. I scrambled backward, not knowing or caring where I would land, fumbling against something cold and wet, fleshy appendages coated in darkness. I recoiled, the sockets of what I encountered barely registering as eyes. They were voids, infinite spaces where memories once thrived, now overrun with despair. Why did you summon us? One of the figures hissed, its voice layered like the rustling of dead leaves. I could not help but wonder if it had once been human. You were meant for us, destined to know. Know what? I cried, scrambling to my feet and pivoting away, a sliver of rational thought clawing at my brain. What do you want with me? Your hunger made your soul ripe for plucking. Another spoke, its voice sultry and unraveling like a thread. You weren't curious enough. You wanted to know even more. The shadows enveloped me, a chill creeping up my spine as I fought against the enormity of their presence. Images began flooding my mind, vivid and invasive moments of misplaced curiosity, mistaken assumptions, letters answered on a whim, boxes opened that contained far more than they should have. Each haunting visage carried the label of memories past, souls long lost and now twisted together in a sorry tapestry. They writhed on the periphery, faces distorted into ghoulish masks of remembrance. Screaming silently of their dark destinies, I froze, realization dawning like a heavy hand pressing down on my chest. They were once like me, perhaps even seeking the same enticements. Tales of horrors found on forgotten corners of the internet, promises of mysteries that defied logic. They had stumbled into traps set by their own folly. Now part of this frenzied gathering, come closer, the initial entity beckoned, extending a shadowy limb, its nails sharp and glistening as they fractured the air between us. Let us show you the real truth that your heart yearns to grasp. With each flicker of their elongated fingers, the walls warped further, and within the distortions, glimpses of terror enticed me. They flickered between visions of deranged individuals lurking in corners, their joys twisted into grotesque mimics, smiling through decay, their laughter turning into a wicked symphony of despair. I shouted, voice breaking against the monstrous tide washing forth. I willed myself to retreat but found the shadows pulling me forward, a grotesque tug of war in which I felt increasingly susceptible to their dark allure. They promised answers, knowledge, the ultimate revelation of all sorrows. As the last shreds of resistance crumbled, the room darkened to a suffocating hue, the shadows thickening around me, smothering and curling. The whispers had transformed, blending into a single throaty chant that echoed through the void, dragging in despair and anguish from each and every wall. Join us in knowing, they sang, a dreadful invocation that wrenched my heart with perverse delight. Just as it appeared, I would succumb to dive willingly into the black hole of their secrets. A low growl arose from the fractured shadows, cutting through the collective call. A new presence surged like a brand against raw flesh, exerting an oppressive weight promising authority. What you're about to learn is far greater than myths, the new voice growled, resonating through the chaos, pulling at something deeper within me. But before I could process the intrusion, the shadows thrashed, screaming in a language I could not decipher. The old menace wrestled back against this newly arrived force, but its defiance seemed more feral, primal, and untamed. That I, in the moment of turmoil, I could only stand helplessly, a pawn in a game far older and more significant than I could ever comprehend. The battlefield that formed was like two storm fronts clashing, and within it, I grew dizzy with dread as the darkness threatened to tear me apart, caught between the seductive whispers that called me to oblivion and the brazen challenge of newfound potency. Then the clash reached its peak. You do not control me, the new voice roared, shaking the very foundations of my twisted reality. All at once, I felt a voice enter my mind, feral yet familiar, a deep, unyielding truth cloaked in an ever-hungry darkness. Do you wish to be the vessel of ultimate knowledge? It whispered intimately, puncturing through the chaos like a dagger. And before I could answer, the shadows wrapped tighter, squeezing with insane fervor, demanding my attention as a sinister gleam sparked through the darkness. The walls trembled, and a crack emerged in the air themselves, a doorway to something unimaginable, something that grinned back with the promise of both horror and revelation. I felt pulled toward it, a moth to an infernal flame, a chance to know once and for all. But whether it was salvation or doom, I couldn't yet tell. That I took a step forward, heart racing, as the darkness opened wide. As the crack in reality yawned before me, I hesitated, knowing that what lay beyond might be a final escape or an irrevocable descent into madness. The whispering shadows stilled, holding their collective breath as if anticipating my choice. The flickering silhouettes hovered closer, their hunger palpable, their ice, if they could be called that, fixated on my wavering resolve. Step into the abyss, the voice murmured seductively, a serpent-like sibilance woven through my thoughts. Discover the truth of existence, the secrets buried in the marrow of souls long forgotten. The offer danced tantalizingly before me, pulsating in rhythm with my racing heart. I strained to catch a glimpse of what lay in the darkness, but it remained an intangible mass, flickering with the echoes of long-lost memories and the chilling laughter of things I could scarcely comprehend. I felt myself teetering, one foot on the precipice of irrevocable knowledge that could validate every horror I had experienced, every moment of deep-seated dread I had harbored. The flickering forms recoiled suddenly, as if sensing an impending shift in the air. They exchanged glances, their features twisting with shared panic. "You will regret this," a voice hissed, ice trailing behind its words. "Once the veil is lifted, it cannot be replaced. We show you nothing but the truth, but the truth can be consuming." I could almost see the shadows flicking between my limbs, weaving tighter and tighter in an embrace that felt both fervent and unyielding. Breaking free from their grasp was out of the question. With every beat of my heart, the new presence in my mind grew stronger, a hum of electricity sparking within me, as if it were beckoning me to take one final step. "Embrace it," the dark voice urged. "You must know." Just as I was about to plunge into the void, the air shuddered. A gust like the roar of an unseen tempest blew through. A raucous laughter erupted from behind me, deep and guttural, filling the room with an oppressive sense of dread. The shadows convulsed, voices rising in shrills of warning, their unity fracturing momentarily. "Not today," a chilling voice interrupted, and a figure surged forward through the shadows. A fierce silhouette defined by a halo of pale, sickly light. As it broke the border between worlds, it swelled with an energy that flickered hauntingly, radiant against the sea of darkness. The newcomer's features shifted, an ever-blurring face teetering toward familiarity before dots of memory slashed my thoughts into chaos. "Get away from her," the figure, or whatever it was, shouted. As it moved closer, I sensed it was neither friend nor foe. It was a fragment of light birthed from my insecurities, an echo of my past, a specter filled with sorrow and regret. "Choose," it begged, reaching out to me with an arm made of translucent sparks. "You cannot know what lies in that darkness. It's not the truth you seek. It's only a mirror reflecting every horror you've ever faced." Desperation clawed at me as I looked between the two forces warring for my soul. The darkness coiled tighter, and the whispers returned, a cacophony of promises and increasingly frantic warnings. As dread coiled within, it twisted my stomach into knots, forcing me to consider the price of what lay ahead. Suddenly, shattering the tense equilibrium, the crack in the fabric of reality expanded, spiraling outward with a ferocity that drew the shadows back. Something was bursting for the rumble that felt nauseating, as if the very ground was about to give way beneath us. "You don't understand," the dark figure screamed, the shadows wriggling furiously as its furious grasp on the past threatened to crumble entirely. "They'll use you. You will become part of their collection, forever knowing, forever lost." I was caught in the unfolding chaos. Energies colliding around meth light tugged on my heart with hopeful desperation while the shadows promised lethally alluring truths. They surged toward me, fragments of staticky horror from maddened lives swirling in an uncontrolled tempest that crashed through every boundary of My senses. In that moment, I understood. Both realms desired my surrender, but for opposing purposes. Me, the vessel of agonizing knowledge, or the anchor of a light long extinguished. Just then, before I could breathe or react, a deafening roar erupted from the darkness, a manifestation of pure malice unleashed, shaking the ground beneath us. The fabric of the void shattered further into jagged shards, the very essence of fear spilling forth. As I stumbled back, the whispering shadows convulsed, emitting distorted cries until it coalesced into a single Intitian eye, vast and bloodshot, staring directly into my soul, flooding my mind with doubts I had long buried. Know that which you fear. Let despair consume you. I felt its weight, the all-encompassing dread. The fragile barrier between realms burst entirely, and nightmarish shapes unfurled themselves, grotesque and grinning, eager to drag me to where light could never permeate. With no time to breathe, the overwhelming urge to choose crashed over me again, the pull from both entities magnifying, forcing me to act. I lurched toward the beckoning darkness just as the room exploded in chaos, shadows and light both cascading against each other with a ferocious intensity. In that harrowing second, all I could think was that the true horror was beginning. Nothing would ever be the same again. And then, in one devastating moment, the unknown consumed me whole. Darkness enveloped me, a thick, smothering cloak that swallowed every trace of light. My senses spiraled into disarray. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, a frantic drum beneath the weight of silence that clawed at my sanity. I was submerged, the world I knew utterly ripped away, replaced by an echoing void that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. Distant memories tugged at me. Half-formed figures blurred along the edges of my mind, whispering half-truths in forgotten tongues. Voices intertwined, creating a haunting symphony of despair. Something within the depths lurked, an indefinable horror that pulsed with every heartbeat, a grotesque pulse of malice that echoed my own terror. As I flailed in that oppressive darkness, raw panic surged through me. I felt ethereal tendrils brushing against my skin, slippery and icy, whispering malevolent promises that sent chills skittering down my spine. Follow us, they insidiously beckoned, weaving through dim memories of laughter and warmth obliterated by this consuming void. Feel the truth. Sudden flashes of incandescent light flickered sporadically through the murk, illuminating grotesque shapes, twisted faces contorted in agony and rapture, suspended in infinite torment. I was stuck in a hellish gallery, where each painting depicted a moment of anguish captured in eternal pause. Their hollow eyes fixated on me, drawing me closer as I gasped for air in the midst of this unearthly nightmare. Why do you resist? A voice purred soothingly, too close, its breath an icy caress against my nape. We hold the answers you seek. Let us show you what it means to truly understand. My instincts screamed for me to evade their grasp. But the flickers of light became inviting, snippets of memory so warm they felt tangible. A soft laugh that echoed like a beloved song. The faint aroma of fresh rain. A gentle touch. Each distraction seemed to blur the edges of my fear, promising a sanctuary within the impending darkness. I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Friends I'd long lost, their eyes filled with a haunting yearning, frozen in moments of despair echoing my fears. Join us, they mouthed silently, their faces imbued with a sorrowful wisdom. You must embrace it. This is who you are meant to be, part of the collective, part of the truth. With every passing second, the air thickened with despair, the shadows dancing around me, hungry for my choice. I felt an intense pull against my chest, drawing me toward the ghostly faces, whose hollow mouths whispered treacherous secrets meant to seduce me into surrender. Within the tender burden of hope that threatened to breach the surface of my heart lay the terrifying realization. Each revelation would demand a sacrifice, a fragment of my cherished sanity. Suddenly, the deep silence ruptured with a guttural roar, shaking the remnants of my resolve. A monstrous shadow emerged from the abyss, a glistening mass of writhing limbs. Countless faces blended into a grotesque tapestry of sorrow and anger. It towered, an oppressive figure cloaked in despair, its many mouths opening to reveal jagged jaws that longed to consume. Foolish child. It hissed, its voice reverberating in my skull. You think they want you to find yourself? They only crave your submission. Join us. All will be revealed if you let go of your struggle. I staggered backward, my sanity warping beneath the intensity of the attack. The ghostly faces contorted, their soft whispers giving way to piercing cries that split the air like a blade. Confusion turned into a maelstrom of terror, a carnival of horrors echoing in my ears as I fought to turn away. A desperate thought pierced the cacophony around me. What if they're right? What if this anguish is the truth I need to embrace? That final, sinister whisper from a fading past beckoned. What was I willing to sacrifice for the knowledge of a world that seemed eager to consume my very soul? Dark tendrils lashed out in anger as realization lit in my mind. With one single glance back, I saw reflections of laughter morph into agony, memories of joy, beneath the suffocating weight of despair. Yet, amidst it all, their eyes were pleading, pulling on the very thread of my existence, daring me to pull closer, promising a completion to my fragmented self, and no longer could I distinguish between the fragile rays of light and the swallowing shadows. They had morphed into a swirling tempest. You could belong, they whispered, their voices now indistinguishable, a haunting melody woven from sorrow and fear. A split-second flicker ignited within me. A choice appeared as another scream projected from the depths. You must decide right now. Time twisted as I stood at the crux of the chaos, dread clawing relentlessly with icy fingers. In a moment of savage clarity, I tore myself from the pull, pivoting to flee, instinctively racing back toward the memories of warmth, of echoes that felt real. But with each frantic step, the darkness was relentless, roaring in fury as it surged forward. The shadows began to weave into a harrowingly beautifully formed figure, an amalgamation of those lost and the dark entity, the very embodiment of despair, anger, and longing morphed before my eyes. Do not run. It screeched, its infinite eyes locking onto mine, prismatic with anguish, rage, but above all, a promise wrapped in dread. You cannot escape what you are. In that moment, the heaviness of inevitability crashed over me, trapping the breath in my throat. The figures surged closer, faces twisted from familiar to monstrous, and just as the shadows grasped at my limbs, the world flashed painfully bright. I found myself standing on the threshold of a door, cold metal filling my hand, my pulse racing beneath the layers of dread. A laugh echoed from behind it, a familiar sound, soothing yet laced with a chilling undertone. As I twisted the handle, everything inside me burned to know what awaited beyond. But the moment the door swung open, the true horror caught me in its grasp, plunging me into a reality far beyond comprehension, a reality teeming with the darkest fears I had yet to confront. And there, in the flickering shadows of a nightmarish scene, stood a figure I had long since buried within the depths of my soul, a part of me I thought lost forever. Welcome home, it whispered, grinning wide, revealing a mouth agape with unending darkness. The chilling welcome sent shivers cascading down my spine as I stared at the figure, my breath suspended in a whirlpool of disbelief. The very air crackled with an electric intensity, a living pulse of trepidation that thrummed in my ears, drowning out rational thought. You're just in time, the figure said, its voice dripping with a sickly sweet taunt. Features familiar yet distorted flickered in and out of focus, a cruel parody of affection layered with shadows that intertwined with its shape. So many have been waiting for you. The door behind me creaked ominously, as if the darkness itself wished to close off my escape. I could not unsee the abhorrent landscape sprawling behind the figure, a grotesque tableau of anguish manifesting in swirling smoke that coiled like serpents, each wisp curling around the cries of those lost, their faces forever contorted in despair. The cacophony of their screams was a chorus woven with remembrance, mingling with terror that resonated in my chest. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling as I fought against the mounting dread clawing at my throat. What do you want from me? How narcissistic were my fears that I could imagine myself the centerpiece of this wretched display. Yet as I asked, I felt the walls of my sanity thin, each moment in the presence of that wretched being eroding my will to resist. Why, you are the answer, it cooed, gliding closer, its form pulsating in grotesque undulation. The air around us thickened with memories coated in bitterness. Memories that felt foreign yet achingly familiar, as if I were both witness and participant in a dance of degradation. You're gifted, you see? A vessel for the collected despair of those who have walked the path before you. My heart raced as it reached toward me. A hand that was smooth and comforting yet brimming with an insidious warmth. I recoiled instinctively, drawing back against the threshold, braced against the door's solid frame as the darkness slithered around the edges of my vision. Attempting to drown me in its wretched embrace, I shouted, feeling the weight of dread pressing against my chest, a spectral hand squeezing tighter against my heart. I will not. Refusal is merely denial of a reality written in blood. It whispered, the words a sinister lullaby that wormed into my very soul. Embrace it. All the stories that have brought you here, those echoes that have haunted your night show, deliciously intertwined. Don't you think? The ground beneath me trembled as the shadows lurched closer, crashing like waves against the shores of a doomed destiny. I could feel the presences of the other lost souls gathering in the periphery, pooling together like ash-choked fog, their faces stretching into desperate grins or looming scowls, urging me to succumb to despair. Suddenly, the figure's hand stretched forth, glowing in a sickly array of colors that defied reason, its fingers curling like a spider's legs. Join us, and behold the truths of the world beyond. There was an urgency in its voice that resonated with the somber cries of the trapped soul, an invitation to submit to a familiar darkness that thrummed like a heartbeat within me. I forced myself to look away, eyes darting into the abyss beyond where a shimmering portal appeared, its edges pulsating with the force of memories too dark to confront a swirling vortex of nightmares and secrets, tantalizingly close. It promised liberation wrapped in anguish, the release of judgment that had haunted me relentlessly. In a moment of sheer desperation, I took a step back, turning with the intention of fleeing this realm of torment. I felt the pressure of their collective consciousness pressing in, a storm of whispers swarming around me, hurling accusations and taunting mockery. You can't run from yourself, came a voice from within, the Foga voice that twisted gut-wrenching nostalgia and raw fear. I froze, locked in the throes of sudden clarity. I realized it was not just the figure before me, not only the grotesque faces yearning to claim me as one of their own, but something deep-era primal dread clawing at my core. Then echoes of my past crashed into my psyche, ghostly memories spilling from the dark images of frantic breaths, tear-stained faces, and loss intertwining fiercely. There had been unresolved regret, choices forever etched in shadows, gnawing at the edges of my mind, begging for acknowledgement. Each of them lost something, the figure said, a faint gleam of amusement sparking in its slitted eyes. You, too, will give what is demanded, the sweet surrender of hope, as the very shadows inched closer. Pulsating in sync with my racing heart, a grasping desperation seized me. Could I truly accept that exuberant sacrifice? Was it worth becoming a marionette in this theater of despair? I turned toward the swirling portal, and before I could think, a violent urge propelling me forward gripped my soul. The moment I stepped closer, the whispers rose to a deafening roar, emotions intertwining with the clamor of anguished souls. The room transformed into a whirlwind of chaos, as the figure erupted, fracturing into fleeting glimpses of memory all the places I had ever longed to escape. Every painful moment crystallized in horror, but the final truth erupted alongside it, sending shockwaves through the very core of my Baina revelation that shattered any hopes of returning. Within the chaos, I felt the insatiable hunger behind those hollow eyes. You are indeed one of us, it sang, its voice echoing in a wicked harmony. Time to clear the path for new stories, and as the darkness surged forward in a tidal wave, closing in around me, I was hit with a blinding realization. The faces of my friends were all lost, and the true horror was never the fleeting moments of emptiness, but rather the gnawing truth that I too would become part of this grotesque tapestry, and I couldn't escape, or could I? Suddenly, a figure dashed through the shadows surrounding me, its presence a definitive blur. Run! A voice screamed, desperate, and urgent. A revelation flooded through me, but nothing was what it seemed. I hesitated, torn between the familiar and the grotesque, questions burning in my mind. Will you run, or will you stay? In that fleeting instant, truth hung heavy in the air, And as realization descended, the shadows abated, leaving room for a choice I feared to make. My heart thundered. I knew my fate hinged on my next move, but in this pit of despair, the only thing I truly comprehended was a single terrifying truth. The choice I made would determine not just my own reality but echo through the corridors of time, twisting all existence. With shadows closing in behind me as I felt their longing mouths swirling around my thoughts, I barely whispered the words that could either condemn or save me. It was the only option left to escape the grip of inevitability, but whatever I said from my quaking lips could lead to a rebirth or an eternal destruction. Just as the shadows reached forward, beckoning for my surrender, maybe just maybe, and before I could finish, the darkness surged, eager to claim its possession, and the reality spiraled into unfathomable chaos, as I faced the allure of losing everything at the cusp of acceptance. The shadows hissed like angry snakes, their whispers weaving around me with an urgency that spoke of generations of despair. My gaze darted from the crumbling portal to the tormented figure looming closer, and with each heartbeat, the weight of its ancient, tortured presence bore down upon me like lead. I could see its true form flickering behind its feigned familiarity, a wretched thing, deformed and twisted, threaded with the despair of countless souls. "Feel it, don't you?" it cooed, each syllable drenching my skin in icy dread. "The anticipation of the choice you're afraid to make. Every breath you take draws you closer to your destiny." As its words enveloped me, I felt the oppressive darkness creep higher, mingling with my thoughts, blurring my senses. The carpet of despair that held the souls captive was alive, each fiber woven from lost hopes and the suffocating weight of sorrow. If only I could cut through the haze, if only I could escape. Run. The shadowy figure had cried just moments before, a flicker of rebellion amidst the gloom. I could still hear that voice, echoing now through the depth of my torment, a futile memory that felt more like a desperate prayer than a command. Surely, there was still a way, but just as determination flickered to life within me, the ground beneath my feet quaked violently, as if responding to the swirling emotions, rage fused with despair, and doubt shadowed by anger. I looked down just in time to witness the floor splintering, jagged shards of wood erupting like teeth hungry to consume me. Then, with an earth-shattering roar, the ground split, a yawning chasm ready to swallow more lost souls. I stepped back instinctively, the breath caught in my throat as I gazed into the abyss, a place where the screams of the forsaken echoed like a warped symphony. I could see faces materializing within the darkness. The friend I once lost, the lover who had turned ghost, their mouths opening in silent screams, stretching into forms that were grotesque caricatures of the pain they once knew. "Embrace your past," the figure hissed, its twisted visage flickering like a flame, now more grotesque than ever. "Those you mourn are here with you, waiting for your choice to unravel." In that moment, a haunting vision flashed before me. A memory of laughter shared under wilting trees, sun-drenched afternoons that once pulsed with hope. Those moments bled into darkness as the faces twisted, morphing into specters who longed to drag me down into their depths of sorrow. A visceral terror gripped me, a primal instinct warning me of their hunger. "Join us," they whispered in chorus, an underpinning, seductive sound framing the edges of tragedy. Every choice made every regret bind us anew. Heart racing, I stumbled backward, barely avoiding the yawning pit that threatened to consume me. I turned to where the voice had so desperately pleaded moments before, that vague shape of rebellion. But it was lost in the shadows, now overwhelmed by their relentless hunger. As if they too were caught in a web of torment woven by their own choices, that I felt my resolve fracturing. "I don't want this," I spoke through the knot in my throat, the words sounding feeble against the insurmountable horror surrounding me. I wanted to scream, to tear at the fabric of fate that held me captive. Yet deeper, a familiar dread clawed its way to my consciousness. What if the only escape meant plunging into the depths of that wretched abyss? But the idea of surrendering my will, fusing with them in eternal lamentation, was a sticky web I fought against with all my might. "Choose," came an echo, urgent and insistent. "In choosing, you define the darkness, you shape your very story." Suddenly, behind me, the door creaked wider, spilling the faintest sliver of light across the threshold of terror. Hope flickered within me, intoxicating yet treacherous, the shimmering escape. I could flee into the unknown, out into the world, or face the gaping maw of everything I'd been afraid to confront. What if I don't choose? I stammered, dread clenching its grip even tighter, choking my resolve. You'll be ours forever, the figure crooned, its voice softening to a velvet caress tinged with articulate malice. I could feel them wrapping tighter around me, the souls whose need for acknowledgement had whittled down their very existence to mere whispers of what they once were. Fear snaked its way around my heart as shadows writhed and twisted, coiling eagerly, insatiable, waiting for my answer. I was trapped between salvation and utter despair, with uncertainty tugging at my very core. In a moment of trepidation, I took a step toward the light, desire for freedom igniting within me. But before I could cross the threshold, the ground convulsed again, and the figures lost friends and lovers rose in agony, their claws reaching out, wailing in a symphony of despair that pierced my soul. One last echo of familiarity slipped through their lips, a name I had sworn to forget, a face suffused with love now twisted in torment. Catherine! I screamed, instinctively taking a step back, agonized recognition washing over me. Their faces twisted in grotesque understanding, pulling me back as the shrieks merged into one, drowning every rational thought. I could feel their shadows grasping harder, yearning to drag me down into the chasm where my own despair lay buried, forever a part of the nightmare. Anthena searing light erupted from the portal, dazzlingly white, clashing with the oppressive darkness. The anguished wails became a deafening crescendo as I stood frozen, caught in a web of choice and horror. Would the truth shatter me? Or was my destiny to plunge into that radiant escape? The light flickered, beginning to dim, as a new crystalline scream broke through, splintering the air, a sound not of despair but of vengeance. Escape or accept echoed through my thoughts, a new grotesque truth swirling just beneath the surface, eager to make itself known as the shadows writhed, breathlessly, eagerly drawing closer. I was left with a single final choice, an ultimatum born from the deepest pits of obscured memory. Choose wisely before it's too late. The ground trembled beneath me as I faced the darkness, realizing I stood at the edge not of an abyss, but the precipice of a reality I could not fathom. In that moment of agonizing silence before chaos erupted anew, a chilling voice, familiar and terrifying, whispered in my ear, "Why did you leave me?" And then everything shattered. The world around me fractured, shadows elongating and twisting with fervor, each flickering outline a grotesque mockery of what I wished to forget. The taste of desperation seeped into my mouth, bitter and heavy. The crystal clarity of that voice resonated through me, a bitter reminder of unsaid farewells. My heart thundered as darkness twisted into familiar shapes, and the truths I had buried surged forth like a tidal wave, each wave crashing violently against the fragile barricade I'd erected around my mind. "Catherine," I echoed, half in prayer, half in dread. The weight of her name quivered in the air, and in response, the darkness thickened, suffocating any hope I could salvage. Memories of shared laughter turned sharp and cruel, like knives piercing through haze-laden thoughts. I could see her face, the Nan image so vibrant it threatened to burn through the shadowy veil spread before me. A haunting beauty now rendered as a spectator in my own suffering. "Why did you leave me?" The haunting tone reverberated, echoing around me like the howl of a predator stalking its prey. Each word was drenched in sorrow, yet laced with an edge of accusation that coursed through the very fabric of my reality. The shadows shivered in recognition, a chorus of lost souls whispering their grievances, a vibrant tapestry of grief and betrayal woven into the very air I attempted to breathe. "Oh," I gasped, clutching my head as if to shield myself from the truth spiraling into a suffocating vortex. "I tried to save you." "Save me?" That voice wrapped around my mind, cold and serpentine. "You left me to rot, just like all the others." Suddenly, the chasm yawned beneath me, an unspeakable darkness that urged me closer, drawing me into the very core of my fears. The faces of the lost emerged, each figure a grotesque testament to the choices that led to my present. They clamored together in a cacophony of sorrow, a miserable, twisted hymn of what would never find solace. "This is your fault," they shrieked, nails clawing at the air, teeth gnarled with anguish, their outstretched hands a mockery of those once held dear. Rend yourself from this life or suffer with us forever. Free yourself, came Catherine's discordant plea, hanging in the air like an anchor, tugging at the fragile string binding me to hope. The memories of her, vivid and sharp, drew me in with a lover's embrace, yet they morphed, shifting from tender remnants to dagger-like apparitions draped in sorrow that I clutched my heart, my breath quickening. What was real? What was just the shadow's manipulation? My choice, once an emblem of empowerment, now festered with trepidation, a gaping maw longing to devour the remnants of my sanity. One splintered breath at a time. Then the light beyond the portal flickered, redisplaying a fragmented image of my past intertwined with the wretched countenance of despair. It pulsated, a beacon fighting against the gathering storm of shadows hungry for my despair. You can save me, Catherine's voice rang out, hope mingled with anguish. You can save us all if you choose. With a surge of strength, I took another hesitant step toward the portal, my heart pounding in defiance of the voices drowning me in grief. Light flickered and dimmed, a hesitant heartbeat mirroring my own. But the shadows hissed and writhed, ambitious with malevolence, their whispers mingling into a symphonic chaos that clawed at my resolve. Choose nothing but darkness, they shrieked, the voices winding together in a crescendo that made the air thick with impending dread, suffocating the truth. Transform your fear into despair, and then succumb to us willingly. Stop, I shouted, voice breaking as I clutched my head, trying to drown out the cacophony that threatened to engulf me. Yet, amidst my terror, that fleeting glimmer of Catherine shone through once more, a beacon among the choking shadows. Believe in me. The insistence of her plea pulsed within my chest, shattering the cacophony of despair that sought to possess my fate. Her essence tugged at my soul, attempting to lift me from the bleak morass that threatened to pull me under an exploration into the very heart of the abyss. Just as I prepared to step forward, a surge of darkness erupted from the chasm, coiling around my feet, anchoring me in place. A bone-chilling laugh slithered through the air, thick with malice. Do you want to join them, dear? Embrace what you left behind? They await your arrival. Suddenly, the ground crumbled beneath me, the vibrations sending shockwaves through my body. Faces emerged one last time, swirling with anguish, merging in a kaleidoscope of despair. Catherine's visage flashed, her eyes pleading before they twisted into a reflection of rage and abandonment. No, no, I screamed, heart racing against the inevitability of obliteration. Panic simmered until it boiled over, and as the chasm widened, the cacophony turned into an unstoppable tide, pulling me backward, toward an inescapable fate that in that moment, I flung my arms around me, yearning for a reality that could shield me in existence far removed from suffering. But as cold tendrils grasped my limbs, pulling me inch by agonizing inch, I understood that this was more than my consequence. It was an ultimatum shared with every anguished soul whose whispers now blended with my own. The light throbbed, urging me forward, and within my chest, the whisper of hope sparked once again. Yet it was quickly fading, fleeing from the chaos threatening to engulf it entirely. Just as I reeled from the convergence of darkness and hope, a truth, the final truth, seeped into my consciousness like a poison. Your sacrifice will seal your fate, it hissed, the shadows writhing in anticipation, each whisper becoming a vile promise. As darkness wrapped tighter around my heart, I realized that I stood not before a choice of escape but the precipice of an entirely new horror, one that was relentless. And just before I could escape their grasp, before the gaping maw of despair could claim me, the shadows parted, revealing a new, dreadful figure emerging from the vortex. Catherine, I gasped, stunned. But as the figure stepped into the light, I felt the chill of recognition. It wore my face. I was left gasping as the figure emerged from the shadows, a cruel mockery of my own visage but twisted, warped, a grotesque distortion of who I was. Its eyes glimmered with a malicious intelligence, echoing all my fears, all my regrets, every whisper of despair I had ever encountered. You left her to die, it hissed, its voice a chilling reflection of my own. Now you will join her in her eternal lament. The shadows around me stirred and twisted, tendrils snaking toward me, wrapping around my ankles like vines of darkness. Panic surged through my veins, solidifying into terror as I realized that this was no mere imitation. This was the essence of all my failures, the very manifestation of everything I had tried to escape. It was the truth I had pushed aside, and it held a mirror to my past stained with the echoes of every curse I had ever invited into my life. Stop! I screamed, but those words fell flat, consumed by the cacophony of spirits longing for their lost selves. Embrace it, the doppelganger crooned, its grin wide and mocking. Let it weave into you. You are part of this tapestry, just as I am. I felt myself slipping, the boundaries of my identity crumbling under the weight of despair as the shadows closed in, each whisper accusing me of my inadequacies. I could hear Catherine's voice fuse with the chorus of the lost. You left me. You chose your curiosity over my life. The memories crashed around me. Visions of love abandoned, laughter echoing in empty spaces where warmth once thrived. I saw moments of regret bleed into one another, each failure a scar drawn upon my spirit. I stumbled back, battling against the shadows that thrummed with anticipation. Run, I urged myself, a primal instinct pushing me toward the flickering portal behind my light that seemed to shimmer with promise amidst the horror. I ran, every fiber of my being screaming for release from this anguished waltz of regret. But the shadows surged forward, a wave of chaos crashing over me. You cannot escape what lies within. You brought us here. Their voices roared in unison, a chilling duet that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. As I reached the brink of the light, the anguish coiled around my heart tightened its grip, desperate to drag me back into the dark maw of despair that craved acknowledgement. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the choices I had made, choices that spiraled into a reality too torturous to face alone. Catherine, I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling. I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. Her name sliced through the swarm of darkness encroaching around me, an act of defiance that felt simultaneously comforting and terrifying. I could feel shadows retreating ever so slightly at the sound of her name, like a prayer reaching the heavens. Find me, came her voice, drawn from the depths of my memory, fragile yet fierce. Desperation surged in my veins. I had to reach for her, for the love we had forged and lost. It wasn't just about freedom. It was about redemption. I turned my back on the grin of my doppelganger, fueled by a raw urgency to reclaim not only Catherine's memory but all the light I thought I had abandoned. With one last glimpse over my shoulder, I spoke with conviction. I refuse to be your prisoner any longer. The darkness shrieked as I plunged into the portal, shattering the fabric of despair that had held me captive. But just as I thought I had escaped, a voice lilting through the shadows murmured, "You can never escape what you are capable of becoming." The laughter of hundreds echoed in my ears as the light enveloped my body, pulling me into an expanse of piercing brightness. As I emerged, reborn into my own reality, the weight lifted, and I gasped for the sweet breath of normalcy. But even as I reveled in salvation, a chilling thought prickled at my mind. I turned towards where I had fled, the portal still shimmering faintly behind me, and a flicker of movement caught my EYIT mirrored me, grinning wider than ever, its eyes glowing with the promise of darkness and echo incarnate, the fractured remnants of my countless choices forever lingering just beyond the threshold. I stumbled back, heart racing, the horror of realization hitting hard. I had escaped, yes, but the entity within the shadows would never leave. It would always exist, a haunting reflection of my past, waiting to reclaim me when my courage faltered. And with that grim understanding, I realized the true horror. The darkness was within me, impossible to escape, just waiting for an invitation to return to the surface. Find me. The last echo of her voice murmured softly, but it was too late now, and I felt the shadows whisper behind me, weaving their intentions into my very essence, sealing the truth with a chilling finality. As the shadows crept closer and the laughter followed, I knew it was just a matter of time before I would open that door again. The last thought echoed in my mind like a curse. I had become my own worst nightmare.